A crisp morning inside the vast aircraft hangar. The roar of jet engines echoes against the steel walls. A middle-aged man in a worn janitor's uniform quietly mops the floor near the plane's landing gear. Suddenly, a young manager enters, her heels clicking sharply on the cold concrete. She stops, eyeing him with visible disgust. "You don't belong in this area," she snaps. The man looks up, silent, his gaze unnervingly calm. A young engineer snickers. The manager crosses her arms. "I didn't hire you to stand around." He simply bows his head and continues mopping. No one knows that beneath his faded sleeve lies a hidden military tattoo. Ryan Cole was a shadow in a world of high-tech machinery. At 37, he was a man defined by silence and the rhythmic, hypnotic stroke of a mop. Every night, while the city slept in its warm beds, Ryan worked the graveyard shift in the hangar, cleaning the toxic grease and grime left behind by the giants of the sky. The hangar was a cavernous cathedral of aluminum and titanium, smelling of kerosene, ozone, and the metallic tang of ambition. To the world he was invisible, a ghost in a blue jumpsuit moving between the shadows of multi-million-dollar jets. He was the man who emptied the trash bins overflowing with blueprints he could read better than the senior architects, and scrubbed oil from floors he once walked on as a commander of the most elite technical unit in the Air Force. The graveyard shift was a grueling test of endurance that broke lesser men. By 3 a.m., the cold air in the hangar would bite through his thin, fraying uniform, and the oppressive silence would be broken only by the hum of the ventilation and the distant, lonely sirens of the city. His back ached from hours of bending over, a physical manifestation of the weight he carried for his family. But he never complained. He took a strange, haunting comfort in the smell of jet fuel. It reminded him of a time when he belonged to the sky, when he was the one ensuring that heroes came home. He would often find himself staring at the complex wiring diagrams left out on workstations, his mind instinctively tracing the circuits, identifying potential thermal bottlenecks and signal interference that the daytime engineers, with all their degrees, had consistently missed. He was a master of a craft he was forced to forget, a king living in exile among the ruins of his own kingdom. Every night he performed a silent, secret ritual, touching the cold fuselage of a stealth fighter and feeling the heartbeat of the machine, a connection that no amount of grease or humiliation could ever truly sever. He was a single dad, and his entire universe revolved around a small, sterile hospital room at St. Jude's, where his daughter Mia was fighting a battle far more dangerous than any supersonic flight. Mia was 7, with hair that had thinned from aggressive treatment, but a spirit that could outshine any runway light. The medical bills were a mountain he had to climb every single day. The costs of experimental therapies, specialized immunotherapies, and round-the-clock nursing were astronomical. The janitor's uniform was his only lifeline, a humble disguise that allowed him to work near the machines he once loved, while staying beneath the radar of a past he desperately wanted to bury. He worked 3 soul-crushing jobs: cleaning offices in the morning, delivering heavy parts in the afternoon, and the hangar at night. The hangar was the most painful because it was a constant reminder of the life he had surrendered to pay for Mia's breath. Every stroke of the mop was $1 for her medicine. Every insult he swallowed was another hour of oxygen. Evelyn Carter, the newly appointed hangar manager, was his polar opposite. At 29, she was a rising star in the corporate world, polished, efficient, and convinced that the world could be managed through cold spreadsheets and rigid hierarchies. She wore tailored suits that cost more than Ryan's annual salary and carried an iPad like a shield against the messiness of human reality. She had never spent a day with black grease under her fingernails or felt the terrifying vibration of a failing turbine in her chest. To her, discipline was the only currency, and people like Ryan were simply expendable assets, low-skilled workers who were easily replaced if they stepped even an inch out of line. She viewed the hangar as a giant machine where every part had a predetermined value, and in her cold eyes, Ryan was the least valuable part of all, a biological extension of a cleaning tool, unworthy of a name, only a title: janitor. Ryan wasn't always a janitor. Years ago, he had been the apex of aviation technology, a master who could diagnose a catastrophic engine failure just by the subtle vibration of the fuselage or the microscopic change in pitch of a turbine. He had been the engine whisperer for the 5th Special Operations Squadron, a ghost unit that handled the military's most advanced, classified stealth prototypes. But a tragic incident during a high-stakes mission, a mechanical failure he couldn't prevent despite his best efforts, resulting in the loss of his wingman and best friend Jax, had pushed him away from the industry. The guilt was a parasite, leaving him with a heavy heart and a desire to remain invisible, seeking penance in the dirt. He had traded his medals for a mop, believing that he no longer deserved to touch the sky because he had failed the man who shared it with him. He had signed away his military pension to a trust for Jax's family, leaving himself with nothing but the clothes on his back and the burning, desperate need to save his daughter. Evelyn caught him staring at the planes often, and she hated it. One afternoon, as a Boeing 747 was being prepped for a critical maintenance check, she caught him standing perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the massive engine intake of a GEnx 2B engine. He was tracing the curve of the fan blades with his eyes, calculating the bypass ratio and the thermal efficiency in his head, his lips moving silently with the complex calculus of aerodynamics. She marched over, her presence like a sudden cold front. "Stop dreaming, Cole," she barked in front of a dozen staff members, purposefully choosing the most public moment to humiliate him. "Don't imagine yourself above your station. You are here to clean the spills, not to inspect the hardware. This machine is a masterpiece of engineering worth more than your entire lineage. Stay in your lane, or you'll find yourself cleaning the street gutters instead. Do I make myself clear, or do I need to write it in 4th grade English for you?" Ryan didn't flinch. He didn't defend his service, his knowledge, or his soul. He just lowered his gaze, tightened his grip on the mop handle until his knuckles turned white, and whispered, "Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again." A few days later, a junior engineer named Mark was struggling with a minor hydraulic issue on a transport jet. Ryan, passing by with a bucket of dirty gray water, paused for a split second. He heard the erratic hiss-pop of the fluid lines, a sound that screamed of air pockets in the primary actuator. He muttered almost to himself, "Check the pressure valve setting at 3,000 psi. It's cavitation, not a leak. You're bleeding the wrong circuit." Mark laughed, looking at the janitor's name tag with pure mockery. Evelyn, hearing the exchange from across the floor, shut Ryan down instantly. "We don't need your uneducated input, janitor. Stick to the floors and the toilets. If I wanted a technician's opinion, I'd hire one with a degree and a future, not a man who spends his life in a bucket. Your interference is a breach of safety protocol and a liability to this company." The atmosphere in the hangar shifted from routine to high tension when a specialized prototype jet, the X-99 Vanguard, developed a catastrophic engine fault during a pre-flight burn. This wasn't a minor glitch. It was a deep-seated mechanical failure that defied all digital diagnostics. The lead engineers were huddled around their monitors, their faces pale, slick with sweat and the realization of failure. The clock was ticking toward a deadline that couldn't be moved. If the test flight didn't happen by noon, the company faced $50 million in penalties and the potential cancellation of their entire defense contract. Evelyn was under immense pressure. Her career, her reputation, and the company's multi-billion-dollar future were on the line. She was pacing the floor, her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from the board of directors. "Fix it," she screamed at the chief engineer, Sarah. "I don't care what it takes. Swap the engine, bypass the sensors, do something. We have 30 minutes before the general and the investors arrive. The computer says the fuel-to-air ratio is perfect. The ignition timing is flawless, but the vibrations are off the charts," Sarah replied, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the streaming data. "It sounds like the engine is trying to eat itself at high RPM. We can't clear it for takeoff. It would be a suicide mission for the test pilot. Our software is showing green, but the hardware is screaming in pain. We're blind, Evelyn." Ryan was nearby, emptying a trash bin full of industrial waste. He stopped. He didn't look at a screen or a tablet. He tilted his head, closing his eyes, listening to the erratic, dying whine of the XF-110 turbine. To him, the sound wasn't noise. It was a story of metallic friction, a rhythmic, high-frequency chirp that only an ear trained in combat zones and secret experimental labs could detect. He recognized the signature of a resonant frequency overlap, a phantom in the machine that no standard sensor was programmed to find. It was a ghost he had chased before in the 5th Squadron during the development of the first stealth bombers. Without thinking, driven by an old instinct that surpassed his jumpsuit and his mop, he took a step forward into the high-security zone. "It's not the main system," Ryan said quietly, but his voice had a sudden, sharp weight that cut through the panic like a blade. Evelyn spun around, her eyes flashing with pure, desperate fury. "Are you still here? I thought I told you to get back to the bathrooms. This is a multi-million-dollar crisis, not a floor spill. Security, I want this man removed from the premises immediately. He's a distraction we can't afford." But Ryan didn't move an inch. He pointed a calloused finger at the engine's underbelly, near the heat shielding. "Check the auxiliary pump housing. The 3rd bolt on the left is loose, not enough to trip a digital sensor, but enough to cause a microscopic misalignment at high RPMs. That's where your vibration is coming from. It's harmonic resonance hitting the drive shaft. If you don't tighten it now, that housing will shatter within 60 seconds of full throttle, and the entire engine will disintegrate." The sheer technicality and precision of his explanation silenced the room. The senior engineers looked at each other, stunned. Sarah looked at Ryan, her eyes widening as she processed the term harmonic resonance, a concept only taught in advanced propulsion doctorates. "How would you know that? That's a specific documented issue only with the XF prototype series, and that information is classified." "Check the bolt, Sarah," Ryan repeated, his voice firm, calm, and commanding. It wasn't the voice of a janitor, it was the voice of a leader. "You have 6 minutes before the turbine blades reach critical fatigue. After that, no amount of tightening will save it." Evelyn hesitated, her pride warring with the terrifying reality of complete professional failure. She looked at the clock, then at Ryan's steady eyes. "Fine, check it, just so we can prove him wrong once and for all, and then I am calling the police for corporate espionage." The crew scrambled with a new sense of urgency. A mechanic pulled back the secondary heat shield and reached for the auxiliary pump with a specialized torque wrench. A muffled shout erupted from under the wing. "He's right! My God, he's right! The 3rd bolt is backed out by exactly 2 threads. The housing is vibrating like a tuning fork. The thermal casing was masking the acoustic signature from the sensors. It's a miracle the housing didn't crack during the initial ground test." The hangar went dead silent as the mechanic torqued the bolt to the exact specifications Ryan had whispered. The engine was restarted, the vibration smoothed out into a perfect, rhythmic, and powerful hum. The engine sounded like a purring cat, steady and terrifyingly strong. The test flight was saved. Evelyn looked at Ryan, her mouth slightly open, her iPad hanging limp in her hand. For the first time, the mockery was gone, replaced by a haunting, terrifying realization that she had been blind to a giant in her midst. She saw the way the other engineers were looking at him, with awe. But Ryan had already turned away, picking up his trash bin. He had a shift to finish, and a daughter in a hospital bed who needed him to be a hero in the shadows, not on a pedestal. The board of directors was ecstatic. The test flight was a flawless, record-breaking success, securing the company's future for the next decade. However, they demanded a full, immediate report on the miracle fix that had occurred in the final minutes. Evelyn found herself in the boardroom, her voice barely a whisper, her hands trembling as she faced the most powerful people in the industry. It was a member of the ground support staff, a janitor named Ryan Cole. Before the board could even begin to process that statement, the heavy double doors of the hangar opened with a thunderous crash. A high-ranking general, General Henderson, entered, flanked by a squad of MPs in full-dress uniform, their medals clinking. He didn't look at the multi-million-dollar jets or the groveling VPs. He scanned the room with the eyes of a hawk until they landed on Ryan, who was currently scrubbing a stubborn grease stain near the back exit, trying to disappear. General Henderson walked straight toward Ryan, ignoring everyone else. He stopped 2 feet away, clicked his heels together, and snapped a sharp, crisp salute that echoed like a gunshot through the hangar. "Commander Cole, we've been looking for you for 3 long years, sir. The X project is dead in the water without your oversight." The room froze. The silence was so thick and heavy, you could hear the hum of the light fixtures. Evelyn felt her knees go weak, nearly collapsing into a nearby work table. "Commander?" she breathed, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Ryan didn't salute back immediately. He stood there, leaning on his mop, looking like a man who had carried the world on his shoulders for far too long. He slowly reached for his left sleeve, unbuttoning the cuff with steady, practiced hands. He rolled it up, revealing a bold, scarred, and intricate tattoo of the 5th Special Ops Ghost Technicians, an eagle clutching a lightning bolt over a silhouette of a stealth wing, with the words "Silent Vigilance" underneath. "I told you I was done, General," Ryan said, his voice no longer gravelly and tired, but resonant and authoritative. It was the voice of a man who had led hundreds of elite soldiers into the heart of the storm. "I wanted a quiet life. I'm just a man with a mop now. I don't want the sky anymore. It took too much from me." "The program is falling apart without you, Ryan," Henderson said, his voice lowering with genuine, deep concern. "The new prototypes are experiencing catastrophic failures because nobody understands the thermal dynamics and harmonic signatures like you do. But that's not the only reason I'm here. We heard about Mia, we heard about the struggles with the civilian insurance, and why you've been hiding under a different name. The military hospital at Walter Reed has a specialized, top-secret wing for her specific condition. We've already flown in the best oncologist from Zurich. Every single expense is covered under the Veterans Hero Act. You don't have to mop another floor to save your daughter's life, Ryan. Your service, your sacrifice in the 5th, it has already paid that bill 1,000 times over." The news spread like wildfire through the company, turning the hierarchy upside down. Evelyn stepped forward, her face pale as a ghost, her eyes brimming with tears of pure, unadulterated mortification. She remembered every single insult, every time she had called him nothing, every time she had used him as a punchline for her corporate efficiency. "Commander, I had no idea. I am so deeply, deeply sorry. If I had known who you were, if I had known your rank." Ryan looked at her, his gaze piercing through her expensive corporate armor and seeing the small, frightened person underneath. "That's the problem, Evelyn. You shouldn't have to know someone as a commander to treat them with basic human dignity. You shouldn't have to know their rank to listen to their voice or respect their existence. I wasn't just a janitor. I was a father, a veteran, and a human being. That should have been enough for you. Titles are for people who are afraid. Respect is for everyone." He turned back to the general, his eyes reflecting a new light. "I'll come back to the program. I'll fix your engines. But I want one non-negotiable condition. I want to keep this blue jumpsuit. I want to wear it once a week in the labs, to remind me of what it's like at the bottom, and to remind people like these who really keeps this world running while they're busy looking at their spreadsheets." The aftermath was a total radical overhaul of the company's DNA. Evelyn Carter didn't quit, though many expected her to. She realized that her corporate excellence was a hollow, brittle shell built on arrogance. She chose to stay and face the daily shame of her past behavior, using it as fuel to become a better leader. She gathered the entire staff, from the senior VPs to the newest cleaning crew, on the hangar floor. She stood on a wooden crate, no iPad in her hand, her voice shaking but resolute. "I failed as a leader," she began, her eyes finding Ryan, who was now dressed in a clean military flight suit provided by the general, but still wearing his old scuffed janitor's boots. "I allowed titles and arrogance to blind me to the genius and the humanity right in front of me. I treated a hero like a servant. From this day forward, we are one team. No one is just anything in this hangar. If you cannot respect the person next to you, regardless of their job, you don't belong here." The change wasn't just symbolic, it was visceral. Evelyn began spending the first 2 hours of her day in the maintenance pits, not with a clipboard, but with a willingness to listen. She sat with the technicians during lunch, listening to stories about flickering sensors and metal fatigue that never made it into the official logs. She dismantled the executive-only lounges and turned them into collaborative spaces where engineers and cleaners could exchange ideas over the same coffee. The atmosphere changed overnight. Mark was assigned to shadow the cleaning crew for a month to learn perspective and the true meaning of hard work. At first, he resisted, but after 3 days of scrubbing oil and realizing how much attention to detail it required to prevent workplace hazards, his arrogance melted into genuine respect. He began to see that a single missed oil spill could lead to a catastrophic fire. The efficiency of the hangar skyrocketed because the people at the bottom, the ones who saw the leaks first, heard the vibrations first, and smelled the smoke first, were finally empowered to speak without fear of mockery or dismissal. The unskilled labor became the eyes and ears of the organization. Meanwhile, at Walter Reed, Mia's recovery was a miracle born of science and love. Ryan spent his weekends by her bed, no longer haunted by the next bill or the next humiliating shift. He watched her color return and her strength grow, knowing that his years in the shadows had finally led her back to the light. The general visited often, bringing Mia stories of her father's true bravery, not just in the air, but on the ground. He told her how her father was the anchor that kept the most advanced aircraft in the world from drifting into disaster. Ryan Cole eventually moved to D.C. as the chief technical advisor for stealth systems. He didn't take a corner office with a view of the Potomac or a mahogany desk. He worked in the hangars and the labs, with the grease-stained technicians and the young, eager mechanics, where the real problems were solved and the real progress was made. He became known as the commander of the pit, a man who valued a well-torqued bolt as much as a high-level strategy. He spent his time mentoring the next generation of engineers, emphasizing that no technology could ever replace the intuition of a man who knows the sound of his machine. He frequently returned to the hospital to visit other children in the oncology ward, often bringing miniature models of the planes he helped design, telling them that even the smallest part has the power to change the world. On his final day at the old hangar, before his official transition to the Pentagon, the entire staff lined the runway in a spontaneous show of respect. Hundreds of men and women, from senior executives to the cleaning staff he once mopped alongside, stood in a silent corridor of honor. As Ryan walked toward the military transport plane, Evelyn met him at the boarding stairs. She looked different, less like a corporate shark, more like a person who understood the weight of the world. She reached out and shook his hand, a firm, equal, and respectful grip that carried years of unspoken apologies. "We renamed the main maintenance wing after you, Ryan, the Cole Innovation Center, and the first rule on the wall written in massive gold letters is, listen to everyone. The smallest voice may have the biggest answer." She handed him a small box. Inside was a silver mop pin, a custom-made emblem to symbolize that his time as a janitor was as honorable as his time as a commander. Ryan smiled, looking up at the vast, endless sky he was finally returning to without fear. "Just make sure the floors stay clean, Evelyn. It's the most important job in the building. Because if the floor isn't clean, you can't see the leaks until the engine has already failed. And by then, it's too late." He took a deep breath, smelling the familiar scent of ozone and hope. As the plane took off and banked over the facility, Ryan looked down at the hangar through the window. He had been mocked as just a janitor, but he had left as a legend. He had taught a multi-billion-dollar corporation that honor isn't found in a title, and brilliance isn't found in a degree. It's found in the character of the person doing the work, and in the love of a father who would do anything to save his child. He saw Evelyn standing on the tarmac, waving until the plane disappeared into the clouds. The hangar was now fueled by human dignity, an engine far more powerful than any turbine could ever hope to be. Ryan leaned back into his seat, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt truly at home. If you believe in stories that touch the heart and remind us of the value of every human soul, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. Let's build a world where everyone is seen.